Christia, COVID-19 is now being reported in almost every single state, and state officials are looking for guidance on what they should be doing to flatten the curve. Now, this morning, we're asking you guys, our Sunrisers, how you rate the federal government's response to the coronavirus. You can head to KareLuvan.com/vote now to weigh in, or by using our mobile app and clicking on vote. Now, right now, Congress is working to pass emergency funding for the coronavirus outbreak. Meanwhile, President Trump and health leaders are announcing new measures that they say all of us should follow.
My administration is recommending that all Americans, including the young and healthy, work to engage in schooling from home when possible, avoid gathering in groups of more than 10 people, avoid discretionary travel, and avoid eating and drinking at bars, restaurants, and public food courts.
The White House is also addressing the issue of the lack of COVID-19 test kits and testing facilities, stressing more should be available in the coming days. Now, we've even seen the impact of that here locally. People with alleged symptoms, but not being able to get tested. Now, people pointing out the president's own tweets from the early stages of the outbreak, saying he should have rang the alarm sooner. Tweets like this one from March 9th, where President Trump essentially blamed the Democrats and the media for, quote, inflaming the coronavirus situation far beyond what the facts would warrant. The tweets went on to say the Surgeon General says the risk is low to the average American. Now, the president changing his tune, saying this pandemic could last through July or even through August. And yesterday, President Trump was asked to grade his response to the coronavirus from a reporter. He gave himself a 10 out of 10. You can rate the federal government's response right now, again, by heading to KareLuvan.com/vote now to weigh in again, or on the mobile app. And you guys, it's been a steady 4 throughout the morning.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see there's like now a national response. I felt like before yesterday, it was really like the governors and the states taking charge, and it was kind of a mishmash of what different states were doing. And now that there's kind of a federal response, I feel that maybe things will, people will get more on board with it.
Hopefully,
might be a little bit more cohesive. Thanks, Alicia.